grateful that you're here so we can talk about a lot of things in the organization, one of those being the brush clearance program, and some that it may be new to you. There might be a revisit for some of you. There will be some clarification. So we are here in force to support that endeavor and to support you as a community so we can come to a safe homeowners component to what we do in the life safety component, the property conservation, the environmental component as well. So with the organization, as the assistant fire chief, we all have bosses. One of those, my boss is Central Region Deputy Chief William Mayfield. We also have a visitor from the East, which is Deputy Chief Vince Pena from the East Region. We have our jurisdictional battalion chief, which is Josh Biner, who runs Battalion 5. And we have a component of our forestry division that's here as well. Chief Dyer, Debbie, thank you for hosting us here. And so with that, what I'd like to do is introduce Ron Durbin, who is our Chief of Forestry, who's going to walk us through this. And we want this to be interactive. We have a PowerPoint, but we want this to be your time so we can have some clarity. You may be clouded with some of the things that you may think that's going on with the brush clearance, and we're going to give you some of the why behind it. And we'd like to have this very interactive with a lot of questions. So we're here to support that. And with that, I'll kick it off to Chief Durbin.
Great. My name's Ron Durbin. I'm the forestry chief for the fire department. Like Drew said, this can be interactive. I've got a number of slides related to the frequently asked questions. So a lot of the feedback that we've received so far, these should answer the majority of your questions. And then at the end, we can continue with additional questions. You can get a one-on-one if you want to speak specifically to your property. I've got my foresters in the back that will help you through that. But to start with, we're just going to go through all of the frequently asked questions related to the annual notice that you just received and the brush clearance program. Okay, so here we go. Right, so why did I receive the annual notice? There's probably a few of you that have never gotten one before. Is that true? Yes. Right? Perfect, okay. So the reason you got it is that your structure is located in a fire hazard severity zone. And the California Public Resources Code requires that structures that are inside the zone, those homeowners get inspected for fire safety. The LA County Fire Code as well, Section 325, is the same thing. It mimics 4291, but it adds another component because we can go to 200 feet and the California Code goes to 100 feet. So that's the primary difference between the two. I'm going to talk about fire hazard severity zones in 2 slides. Okay? So why is this the first time you've received the notice? So the department, about 2 years ago, we put together a GIS database. So it's geospatial, and we have the ability to map far more accurately than we were able to in the past. So now we use criteria to identify structures and parcels. So the criteria are you in a fire hazard severity zone? Are you single-family residential? Right? The fire code speaks to all residential, but right now we're just focused on single-family residential, and we're going to add multifamily residential down the road. So prior to integrating the GIS into our program, we used to do it just by fire history and visual, right? We're out there driving the streets, and we go, okay, we need to add that one, and we need to add that one, and you add that one. There's human error in that, and we recognize that. And so now we're using an accurate mapping program to identify structures and parcels inside the fire hazard severity zone. So what are the fire hazard severity zone, and who determines those? So the fire hazard severity zones, they indicate the potential for fire on a property, and they use a number of different criteria related to developing the fire hazard severity zones. And so vegetation, topography, worst case fire weather conditions, fire history, predicted flame lengths, burn probability, and a key one associated with fire weather is ember cast. And that is the one that's driving some of the other laws that are coming to fruition, and I'll talk a little bit about that down the road. But who determines the fire hazard severity zone? So CAL FIRE is mandated by the state, by California Public Resources Code 4201 to 4204. And so about every 5 years, they are supposed to reevaluate these zones. Well, they haven't done it since 2007. And a lot of that for them has been related to budget, but a different issue. So they haven't done it since 2007. So they're in the process right now of evaluating fire hazard severity zones. It just happens to coincide with our process of integrating a GIS database. So again, the last update was 2007. The comment period for the current fire hazard severity zones is still open. It was 45 days. CAL FIRE took feedback and they extended it to 110 days. So if you have comments on the fire hazard severity zones, then you can get that to CAL FIRE by April 4th. So there's still time. And then, so they're currently doing just the SRA, unincorporated county. They're going to do all of the other cities after they finish this first component. They expect to have that done, the first part, by the end of this year. And then they're going to work on all of the cities the following year. So that'll be coming shortly. Chief Smith and all of your cities will be doing presentations for them, public hearings on the fire hazard severity zones. So where does the department get authority to conduct defensible space inspections? And again, that comes out of the California Public Resources Code 4291, and it defines the requirements for those inspections. And I'll read it to you specifically. It says, a person who owns, leases, controls, operates, or maintains a building or structure in, upon, or adjoining a mountainous area, forest-covered lands, shrub-covered lands, grass-covered lands, or land that is covered with flammable material shall at all times do all of the following. And in the code, it lists all of those things, and we're going to go through those. The majority of them, all of the things that you're required to do. So you're in the zone, you have to do those things, we're supposed to inspect you. So when is my property going to get inspected, and do you need to be home? So if you live in the desert, we're going to start our inspections about April 1st. Anywhere inland between the desert and here, other than the coast, that's going to be May 1st. And then coastal areas, so all of PCH and then all of Palos Verdes Peninsula, those are all June 1st. Okay, so those are the start dates. It'll take us about 6 weeks normally to complete our inspections, but we expect, because we have a large volume of inspections now, that those inspections are going to take us longer to complete. And so it may be 8 weeks, it may be longer than that, depending on their workload, on when they can get to you to do those inspections. Okay, so do you need to be home? No. Our inspectors, they will come out, they're going to knock on your door, see if you're home. If you're not home, they'll do their inspection. Will they go through locked gates? No. If they can see the property from an adjacent property that's publicly accessible, they'll try that. And then if they really can't, and there's something in the back that they can't get to, they'll try to get to either they'll come back and try to do it. And they might do that once or twice, and then they'll let us know. And a worst case scenario, truly worst case, and I've never had to do it, is to get an inspection warrant. So fortunately, we've been very lucky. We've gotten all our inspections done. So can I call someone if I need clarity on the requirements? And that answer is absolutely yes. So prior to your inspection, you can call the brush clearance unit, and our folks are sitting in the back of the room right now as well. That number, 626-969-2375. It's also in the handout, so you'll get that right there. So what happens after the inspection? There's a phone number on the inspection report that you'll be able to call. It'll be the inspector's name and the phone number at the top of the form. So prior to the inspection, call brush clearance, and we'll help you. We'll guide you through all the process, all the things that you need to do. We're going to talk about them in a minute. And then after your inspection, you call your inspector for what he saw and what the requirements are for you to be compliant. So will I receive an inspection report if my property is in compliance? Well, yes, and you're going to receive it either way. If you're in compliance, you'll get one. If you're not in compliance, you'll get one, but it'll have corrections on it. So at the top of the form, it'll say no violations. That'll be the box checked up in the top right-hand corner. And if there are some corrections that need to be done, they'll check those boxes. They'll write instructions at the bottom of the form so you know specifically what they're talking about. And then, again, you can always call your inspector if you're concerned. I really don't understand what they're saying here. So you just call them and work that out. And then if you need an appointment, at that point, that's when they'll try and meet you. Prior to when they're doing the normal inspections, I just want to go back to that. When they're doing their normal inspections, it's really difficult to make appointments because they're all on duty, right? And they could get a call and they may have to break that appointment, and that just upsets, you for the most part. So what we'll do is do our inspections in as efficiently as we can. And then after the inspection, you'll have your report, you'll have a phone number for contact, and you move forward from there. So what happens if my property needs corrections? So everybody gets at least 30 days to come into compliance. And what I always say, if you're unsure about what they're saying on the form, give them a call, right? And do it right away. Give them a call right away. I really don't understand what you're telling me here. It should be fairly clear. We do the training with all of our inspectors every year. We're doing it right now. And we try to make sure that they are very clear with their instructions beyond just checking the boxes. So here's been we've gotten a lot of feedback on this one based on the notice that comes out. There's some confusion on, do I really need to remove trees? That answer is most likely no. Most likely no. So as long as you deadwood, right, take any dead out of the tree and lift it up 6 feet or 1/3 the height, whichever is less, that's going to be compliant for the most part. If the tree's dead or dying, different story. Then we're going to ask you to take those out. So do I need to remove trees? Don't do that first, right? We're not asking you to do that. Limb them up, take the deadwood out, wait for your inspection, and then see what the inspector says on your report. If they say anything. You have a question? Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't want to interrupt you. Cypress trees, are they just not allowed?
Italian cypress. We'll talk about that in Zone 0. Zone 0, right now they really shouldn't be there. Perfectly honest, they shouldn't be there in the first 5 feet. We know that they are in many cases, and we haven't written them in the past. When I get to Zone 0 and we talk about some of the new laws, we'll talk about that. Okay?
So, one last question.
Sure.
40 or 50-year-old citrus that I had, they break out to 3 limbs, maybe 2 feet off the ground, and they're like 8 or 10 feet, so it's not up there. What happens in cases like that? If you lose 3/4 of the tree because the center's probably not as big as the...
Yeah, if you have any dead in your citrus, you would just take that out. If it's still live, but it's off balance, that's still okay, as long as it's deadwooded and lifted off the ground. Yeah, still okay.
She's saying that you don't trim them to reflect that. It doesn't make sense that a third, that a third is a trunk. It's just, they're not grown like that. The trunk is usually lower. That's what she's saying. I think.
So that the inspectors, if it's a smaller tree, if it's a smaller tree, the inspector will evaluate and tell you what they're looking for, what they need. Yeah.
And you do have to have trees 10 feet away from the chimney.
Correct. That is part of the fire code. Yes. Okay. One of the key questions that we've gotten: why is there an inspection fee? So our program, the primary answer is that it's to make the program cost neutral. So LA County Agriculture, and we have one of our members here today, they've been assessing the inspection fee since 1989, right? So they've been allowed to do that since 1989, and it's in the code. It's in the California Health and Safety Code, Section 14902, and it defines the ability of inspecting agencies to recover their costs. And so they've been doing it since 1989. We have resisted as much as we could. But at this point, it's really difficult for us with our volume. And so we recognize that, and we're trying to just recover our costs to make that program cost neutral. And how we did it, we had an evaluation with the auditor controller, We took all of our numbers. We had the format given to us through our financial management division. It was reviewed by the auditor controller. They said, yes, that's correct. Everything is accurate. And then we took that to the Board of Supervisors and said, we had this reviewed by the auditor controller. You have the authority to allow the fire department to recover their costs. And the Board of Supervisors agreed to do that with us. So it's just to cover costs. So it's a good question. So last year it was about $2.5 million, right? And it just relates to the number of inspections and the fee itself. So
Well, then, would the federal government be able to cover that as well if we apply for a grant? Could we take a little bit of the Ukraine money and bring it back to take care of that cost?
yeah, I don't have that answer for you for that particular question. So go ahead.
The first notice that was sent out was based on the BHFHSZ,
Very high fire hazard severity zone.
which shows all of Malibu, ocean to up, which doesn't make sense. They sent out 150,000 notices. That's $15 million.
So it's right. It's 115,000 parcels countywide, right?
The second notice that they sent out was based on the FHSZ chart, which is the inverse of the other one.
So I'm not sure I'm understanding your question.
There's two different charts. There's one that shows all of Malibu, each side up, if you take the long one. And that's the first notices that were sent out, which was 150,000 notices, that's $15 million. The second updated notice that was sent out is based on in my opinion, the actual fire hazard one, which shows all the vacant land and everything. I don't know how many notices were sent out on that one, but that's the reason why I'm here at this meeting.
Okay. Are you from North County?
What's that?
Lancaster, Acton? No. Do you live local here?
No.
Okay.
Malibu.
Malibu. Great. Okay.
But, I mean, there's a lot of money. It's like you're focusing on every single parcel of land in all of LA County. That's a ton of money. If you take $100 from every single parcel, that's millions and millions of dollars.
Right. Potentially that's true. You're correct. And it's to cover the costs of the program.
I don't get it, it's enforcement.
This is the initial inspection that we're talking about. Right? It's the initial inspection, and that's why we use the health and safety code. That drives that process. Okay? And what we did, though, we phased in the fee. That's the plan. We're phasing in the fee. And we agreed with the Board of Supervisors to do that over 3 years.
Which map are you going to be using?
So the fire hazard severity zone map comes from 2007. It's from the state. That's the map. And
Is that the one you're going to be using?
that is correct. That is the one that we're using right now.
Other one, what happened to that? Because that was the first notice that went out.
Right.
Are you not using that one?
It's the same map.
No,
I'm-
it's not, it's the inverse.
Okay.
It's on my iPad.
If you would like to speak directly with one of our foresters, you can get a one-on-one, and they can discuss all of that directly with you. Okay, they're all, there's like 4 of them sitting at the back of the room, and they can help you with that question. Okay, so we agreed with the Board of Supervisors, and we're phasing in the fee. It's $50. It was $50 last year. It's $100 this year. It'll be $151 last year. That's what the auditor controller approved for us. And the fee doesn't actually show up, and that's actually the next slide. So how do you get billed? It's on property taxes, and it shows up a year after the inspection. So those folks that were inspected last year, the first time anybody's going to see this assessment will be in November of this year. And so the inspections that we do this year, they won't show up until November of next year.
So you're going to be doing inspections every year from now on?
Correct. We have been doing inspections every year. We just haven't had all of the parcels that we were supposed to be inspecting.
So it's not like the Woolsey fire changed the area, or expanded the area of fire severity zone?
Right. So the question is, did the Woolsey fire expand the fire hazard severity zones? No. The fire hazard severity zones have been the same since 2007. Chief?
Can I break in the questions so that way we're recording this so everybody can hear the questions, you know, when we play it all back, we ask people to ask the questions in a mic. Is that okay? We got a microphone.
It's just funny because Calabasas was not in the natural hazard disclosure reports until after, as a high fire severity zone, until after the Woolsey fire. So, you know, I'm a realtor, so it's like we have to provide these natural hazard disclosures reports to the fires by the homes in the area, and it was not. It was in the, some parts of it were, but not the area I know of Calabasas was not before. Now it is, so I just,
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the map that you're referring to. I am aware of the fire hazard severity zone maps, and they haven't changed since 2007. So somebody else it's got to be a different map, or they recognize they missed something, and now they're putting it back in. So have there been state laws changes impacting the requirements of defensible space? And that answer is yes. So there's two. So there's AB 3074 and there's AB 38, and I'll discuss those now. So what is AB 3074? That's zone 0. It's the 5-foot ember-resistant zone. And it became law in September 29, 2020. That's when the governor signed it. It actually was effective on January 1st, 2021. But it's not going to take effect practically for enforcement until the Board of Forestry comes up with specific guidelines on what is supposed to happen in Zone 0, that first 5 feet. So I've seen the draft. The draft is extremely restrictive. There's almost no plants in that first 5 feet. Almost no plants, okay? And so what we're doing now is we're trying to educate all of you that it's coming. It's not going to be enforced yet, but it's coming. And as soon as those guidelines are approved by the state, so the Office of Administrative Law is evaluating, doing an economic analysis on what the true cost of this program is going to be. When they approve that, and we believe they're going to do it at the end of this year to be effective next year, that will impact new construction and remodels immediately. And then existing structures will happen a year after that. So it's almost 2 years.
So if your house is 80 years old, and you've got trees that are 50 years old, that are up close, you've got to cut them down. Is that basically what you're saying?
So her question is, if I have 80-year-old trees next to my house and I've had them forever, do I have to cut them down? And I can tell you this, if the state approves AB 3074 with the draft that we've seen, that would be non-compliant at that point.
what about
So yes.
wooden fences going in between properties?
Right, good question. Wood fences between properties. Within the first 5 feet, that would be considered non-compliant.
Touching from structure from one house to the next
So
house?
no plants basically on our, I mean, houses are like right on top of each other.
Yeah, I recognize, yes.
Have plants, so no plants, no trees, no nothing.
Right, so it's a great concern, right? The aesthetic, and I feel for all of you, right? Everybody that lives in a fire hazard severity zone, when this new law takes effect and they have it fully approved, it's going to be very, very difficult for a lot of folks. There's my opinion, my background is landscape architecture. I got a master's degree in landscape architecture, okay? I am also a registered professional forester. So taking trees out and losing landscape is painful for me too. But it is, right, we expect it to be approved. And so we're trying to share it with you now so you have an opportunity to plan for it and think about that new aesthetic that's going to have to take place and how you can balance fire safety with landscape and aesthetics.
Yeah, excuse me, I have the mic.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
I have a couple of questions. When they're considering costs, Are they considering the homeowner's costs? And also, are they considering the impact to the environment if we get rid of that many trees? Because since for some of us, like in Topanga, there's nothing but trees.
Yeah, great question. I believe all of that's inside their analysis now because they're evaluating right now. And if you want to say something to the governor or CAL FIRE or the Board of Forestry, now is the time to do so.
Will you let us know where we can notify them?
Board of Forestry is the one that's in charge of the program, right? So those are the folks that you'll need to, and I will try to find an answer for you after the meeting. And maybe one of our folks can, Bill or Kathleen, you can look it up right now so you have it ready. Okay.
Any plants whatsoever within the 5 feet in this zone
Yeah.
0? Or is it just 5 feet from the house, just get rid of everything?
Yeah, our expectation after seeing the draft, it's going to be very restrictive.
So, well, restricted meaning that they will say you can have nice plants, or is it just get rid of it?
Yeah, she has it behind her.
You know, we need to use the microphone so that we're recording it and we can hear the questions. So I'm going to be passing the mic around and this lady back here has it.
Thank you. Just for the layperson, could you explain a little bit exactly what Zone 0 is?
I will. And in fact, in 2 more slides, you're going to see a video, and then you're going to see an example that's starting to get to that point where it would be in compliance with Zone 0. Yeah. While we're still here, I'll take another question on this.
So just to feed back to you what I think you said, make sure I got it right. You have a year for new developments and 2 years for remodeled developments before this kicks in.
Okay.
Is that correct?
So when it's finally approved, it will take effect immediately for new construction. So if you're building a brand new house or you're remodeling your house, 50% or greater on the remodel, it will take effect for those properties first. Everything else, the existing structures, will take effect a year after that. So that essentially from now gives us about 2 years for existing structures. And since you're all aware of it now, you have to start thinking about what that really means for you. I don't think that the Board of Forestry is going to have their draft change very much. And back to your question, very, very few plants. Very few plants. So turf grass, but not right next to the structure. Small, under 18 inches plants in containers, non-combustible containers. That's about it. It's very, very restrictive.
Also, what about wooden patio furniture and cushions and stuff like that? Are there restrictions on that?
Right, so patio furniture, anything movable. They're inside AB 3074. That's part of the guidelines, but because they're movable, it's really hard to enforce that. It's more of an educational piece. We're going to say, hey, you should move those things away from your structure. Right, so anything movable, it's more education than strict enforcement.
What about plastic fencing?
Yeah, combustible fencing, that would be a no. Yes, sir.
So my concern is that virtually everyone has shrubs and plants next to their house. And I agree with the realtor here. We were not told this was a very high fire severity zone until, a year ago, even if the maps were old. Nobody knew that. But anyway, if we all have to spend, billions of dollars in removing all of our landscaping around the house, that will actually accelerate climate change and cause more fires. Because without shade and without plants, not only does that wreck the environment, ecologically, but it's going to increase climate change, more fires. Is there a way to comment on this? I mean, can you, because I hope they take that into account. I don't think, this is sort of a civil engineering solution to me. This is like engineers channelizing rivers and putting in dams, and there are consequences when you do that. And that's what's going to happen here. It's not just going to look bad, it's going to cause more air conditioning usage, more heat usage, and that will cause more climate change. That's all.
So more of a comment than a question, but yes, if you want to contact the Board of Forestry at this point, that's your best avenue. Okay, so the question on why Zone 0 and what does it look like? Okay. So I'm going to show you a quick video. It's about a minute long. It relates to that first 5 feet and relates to the impact and structure loss. So it does have sound, but it's really just related to the ember generation that's coming. This is inside a controlled environment. It's got 2 side-by-side structures, right? So this side over here, that one is non-combustible materials. You can see the gravel on the side, non-combustible as well. This side over here has a wood bark mulch, just a couple of plants, combustible siding, vinyl rain gutters. There's metal rain gutters on this side. And the ember cast that's going across both structures is the same. Same velocity, same volume of embers going across. And this is why the state, and it's not just through this kind of analysis, they do after action analysis on many of our fires, and they look at, what is causing structures to burn. And this first 5 feet in all of their studies shows that it's the most critical point. So great question, right? So what Zone 0 does, it talks about vegetation and things that are movable off the structure, not the deck. You see the deck on both sides? They were the same, identical decks. Okay, but one burned related to what was underneath it, and the other one did not. We've seen that before. I don't know if there's great analysis yet to show that it's effective.
So were the wood shingles not going to be allowed on the house itself?
Yeah, so let me talk about that. Now we're talking about, she's asking about wood shingles. We're talking about the things that harden a home, right? Home hardening elements. And those particular elements, there are I don't want to say zero cost, low cost retrofits that CAL FIRE has put out, and that relates to the screens you can put on your vents, the siding that you can use, simple things like caulking and weather stripping, right? Low cost elements that you can apply to your structure to prevent ember intrusion on the inside. So that's kind of the key with all of the home hardening elements.
But I was thinking, like the craftsman style, for instance, right? Is all wood shingles. Would that be banned?
No,
Okay.
no. So, but you know what? I don't want to say no, because down the road, the state may say, you know what? We're going to use different materials on our siding now in fire hazard severity zones, just like they've done with roofs, right? So they may apply the same standards to new construction after, if they write a law like that, it would apply to new construction after the fact, right? But it wouldn't be retroactive. And so all of the things that we would talk about that you could do to retrofit your home to harden it, to prevent ember intrusion, those things are all recommended, not requirements. Okay? So what does it look like? What would an ember zone, a 5-foot ember zone, look like? So it's close, right? It's kind of close. This part right here, this is Oenothera, if you know that plant, pink flower, pretty cool, drought tolerant. But it would need to be moved just a little bit farther away, right? So it's fairly close on what a Zone 0 might look like. So this one here, right? These ones here, yeah, a little farther away. And the reason is just like in the video that we showed, there was combustible mulch and just a couple of plants, and that was enough to carry fire into the structure. So that's why the state, they recognize this is the issue that takes out homes, and they're trying to prevent that loss. Yes, ma'am.
I think chemtrailing and the aluminum that they're spraying on us is a fire accelerant, and that's what's taking out homes.
So, thank you.
Hold on, chemtrailing is aluminum. What's chemtrailing? Spraying that they do on us. The chemtrailing, oh my God, that they're spraying on us to eliminate the sun is a fire accelerant. And that's why we had the Woolsey fire and the Paradise fire, because they were spraying fire accelerant on us.
Is it actually proven?
Yes.
StopTheCrime.com.
Okay, thank you for the comment. So let's talk about right now what happens. Do I need to remove plants within 5 feet of my structure? Right now, when we're doing our inspections, no, because it's not the law yet. Okay, when it becomes enforceable, that's when we will be looking at this more closely. But until then, it's all an education process to let everybody know it's coming. Please be aware and start planning your landscapes. Okay, so what is AB 38? And this is related to real estate inspections. So if you're in a very high fire hazard severity zone or a fire hazard severity zone, you're now required, and you probably know this in the real estate industry, correct?
No, I'm not sure.
Okay, so AB 38 requires that a seller provide a compliance certificate, an inspection certificate to the buyer if you're living in a fire hazard severity zone and you're selling your structure there. Okay, so that's the new law. That law took effect on July 1st of 2021, so it's been in effect for a while. Our folks in forestry do those inspections. The inspections that are happening now related to annual brush inspections, those inspections related to AB 38 are good for 6 months. So say you had your inspection May, this month, that compliance report, that would be good through October. And then after that, you could go to our website. We have a little a place to click on, and you can get your AB 38 inspection if you're selling your home. You don't want, and there's no charge for it, right? So we have one annual inspection fee, period, and then the AB 38 is just included in all of that. Yes, sir. Do you have the microphone?
You might have said this in the beginning. I just wanted to know. I'm sorry if you already said this in the beginning, but who was it? The forestry who does and determined the fire hazard zones?
Fire hazard severity zones are completed
Determined by
by
who?
CAL FIRE.
CAL FIRE. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
They have two different maps.
So you may be talking about the 2007 fire hazard severity zone map.
Yes, there's
And
one.
the new one that they're working on that's been put out, and that's just related to state responsibility area, and that's unincorporated LA County. And it's for CAL FIRE, for the state, it's all the unincorporated counties. So all of the cities are not included yet. That's coming, that's what I mentioned. We're going to, after the state completes this first review, just for the state responsibility areas, they're going to do what's called local responsibility areas. That's all of the cities. And each of the cities are going to have the opportunity to review the new maps that CAL FIRE is putting forward.
So we need to get our mayors involved.
You could? Yes, you could.
Thank you. If you have oak trees
Debbie, can you want to?
near your house,
Hold on.
Thank you very much. If you have oak trees near your house, which takes precedent? Preservation of the oak trees or this?
Oak trees that's a great question, because oak trees are a little bit different. We do have an oak tree ordinance for the county, And we, again, I'm a forester, so we do everything we can to preserve and protect. That includes the oak tree resource. And so as long as they are limbed up, lift off the roof, at least 5 feet. And by the way, I believe the AB 3074 is going to be 10 feet off the roof. So they're limbed up, they're deadwooded, and they're lifted off the roof. They would be compliant. So we're not looking forward to having anybody take any oak trees out. Okay, next question. So do the inspections impact fire insurance? This is a common question. Well, the insurance industry, they set their own rates using their own wildfire risk modeling. They do look at fire hazard severity zones. They take into consideration a number of other things as well. We talked about that piece related to the fire hazard severity zone, so I'm not going to cover it again. What are the insurers supposed to take into account, though, when they're coming up with your rates? And they're supposed to look at defensible space, any kind of home hardening upgrades, whether, what kind of proximity you have to fire hydrants and your fire stations. They are looking at access, ingress, egress. They'll look at whether you have a fire safe council in your community. Do you have a CWPP, right, a community wildfire protection plan? Santa Monica's does. And are there community fire breaks? They look at all of those things in their risk analysis for mitigations and relate that back to your rates. And so it's truly up to them. We don't have anything to do, the fire department doesn't have anything to do with insurance and insurance rates. Our data, it goes directly to CAL FIRE because we're required to use a common database reporting system. So it goes to CAL FIRE. Whether it goes to the insurance industry, I couldn't tell you what CAL FIRE does with it after that. If you wanted to talk to somebody from the California Department of Insurance, I've included an address inside the handout. But I also have a phone number for you if you want to write that down. It's 800-927-4357. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what we're going to look for and the things that we're looking for you to do to make sure your house is defensible. So to start with, you work from the structure out. Right? Look at your structure. Are there things that you can do, low-cost retrofits to harden your structure? Not something that we're going to look for in our inspections, but something you should be looking for to make sure that you have a hardened structure that's going to resist ember intrusion. Right? We will start looking at zone 0 first, right? This first 5 feet. For us, we're going to look at, do we have trees touching or overhanging the roof? And do we have debris on top of the roof? And I'll show you some photos of that in a bit. Okay, and then you'll look at the second zone, right, from 5 to 30 feet. That's thinning and deadwooding and cutting grasses down to 3 inches. Kind of more intense than as you move away from the structure. Zone 2 from 30 to 100 feet. A little less reduction in fuels, but the same kind of thing. You're going to limb trees up. Take the deadwood out and cut the grasses down to 3 inches. And then depending on your conditions on your site, on your parcel, you may go out to 200 feet. So within inside the LA County Fire Code. So a couple of examples now. Okay, so slide A up here, or photo A. Bougainvillea, right? Receptive fuel sitting on top of a structure. What happens, Chief Smith, if we get ember cast into that structure and the wind's blowing? We'll make it easy, 40 miles an hour.
It's going to go through it relatively quick because of the transition. Bougainvillea is beautiful, but it accumulates a lot of deadwood in it. You can't really see. It can be pretty explosive when exposed to enough heat. When transitions happen quick.
Did everybody hear, Chief Smith?
Yeah.
Good. Okay.
Oh, the camera. I have to repeat that the camera couldn't hear me. So bougainvillea is beautiful, but accumulates a lot of dead wood. So this, however, from the street, that you don't have any natural hillside or vegetation proximal to you. Remember ember casts that you saw in the video, those things, embers will travel 3 to 5 miles on our Santa Ana wind conditions. And so that's why one of these components of a structure like this, where you think, oh, I'm not even near a hillside. When we have our major on our high-risk days, these are the type of structures that we have significant loss under, structure loss because of beautiful vegetation like this that is highly receptive when the wind's blowing 40 to 50 miles an hour, relative humidities 7 to 12%, temperatures are 75 to 90. And so it looks in 300 days out of the year, it wouldn't be an issue. But about 28 days of the year with our high-risk days is when this becomes an issue.
Great, thank you. So fun fact, the great purple color, those are leaves. They're not actually the flowers. The flowers are small yellow flowers, right? So those are just the leaves. So we're going to look at, right, some separation of fuels. We're going to look at the roofs to make sure that they're clean of debris. And then when Zone 0 comes into effect, this is kind of what it would look like. So this is right next to the structure, and this is cleaned out. Okay, so limbed up and separated from the structure 5 feet. Yeah, that's actually the same structure before and after. So I see you're taking a picture. I'll wait until you're done. You good? Okay. So here's this 5 to 30 feet. And when we talked about earlier, right, we're going to limb our trees up, separate fuels. We're going to separate horizontal and vertical continuities. So all of the dead has been taken out from underneath. This might relate to your orchard a little bit in the same way. You just take out this dead and lower branches, so we separate the ground fuels from the aerial fuels. So this is a before A here, a before B here, and then here's the cleaned out area underneath, right? So it's still there. You still have your canopies, but there's a separation of fuels now, and that's what breaks fire running through your landscape. Okay, so this is a little more common. From 30, zone 2, from 30 to 100 feet, you can see the separation of fuels now. This is a California pepper, lifted up, deadwooded, right? Raffulepis, pretty common. Society garlic, Tilbagia in there. So pretty common. And that's kind of what we're looking at. And for those folks that have this sort of condition, same kind of thing. They do have a lot of cypress evergreens that have a lot of oil content. So a little more, I wouldn't recommend that kind of landscape. The pine trees look great. They're laced out, right? These are Pinus canariensis, right? Canary Island pines. A lot of juniper arborvite. So not really the plant selection that we would be looking for. But certainly they've got some separation of fuels. You can see the grasses are down to 3 inches, probably just a mowed lawn. But generally that's acceptable. Okay, so when you get down to the 200 feet away from a structure, particularly down slope, all the grasses should be cut down to 3 inches, right? So the grasses that look like this are now looking like that when you're done. This is our folks from County Ag, right? They're the vendors that work for us when we get non-compliant parcels that we have to go and do enforcement on. Could we have done more of this, a shaded fuel break where the lower limbs are taken off and the canopy still intact? Yeah, we could have done more of that. You can see there's some stumps down here that were completely taken out, but they didn't have to be. Our preference would be that gets lifted up and limbed up so it looks like this, right? So we call it lollipopping. So it's a shaded fuel break, and they could have had more if they had done this instead of taking it completely out. So one of the reasons that we don't want them to take everything out is we're always concerned about erosion. So we always try to balance this degree of defensible space with erosion issues. Okay, so what are the things that you're going to see for the inspection? So this is what the inspection report looks like. This will say no violations observed. This will be the number of the inspection, whether it was the first or the second or the third. There'll be a place up here for the inspector to write their phone number, the inspector's name. This will be your name and address. And then they will check boxes if they find things that need to be corrected. And down at the bottom, they'll write specific instructions on what you're supposed to do to clarify anything that may be ambiguous just by checking a box. So this is the inspection report. And you'll get one that says either you're compliant or you have corrections. Either way, you're going to get one. There's a door hanger if you're not home. This is really just a delivery device. It's a yellow envelope that they'll wire to your door. And it'll have the inspection report on the inside.
Would they make a note of the front doormat being a fire hazard?
Probably not. Probably not. Okay, and the last slide, the summary. And then after this, we'll take any kind of questions you might have. And we can also do, if you want one-on-one, we can do that as well. But in the group, we'll take the questions if you want to ask them then. So the inspections are going to start April 1st in the desert. So that's coming up for us depending on rain, which is still raining. So we may delay the start of those inspections. All the inland areas are May 1st, which is everybody here in Calabasas. And then the coastal areas are June 1st. When you're doing your defensible space, start closest to your home and work your way out from the structure. Limb your trees up, remove any dead or dying vegetation, cut any grasses down to 3 inches. Everybody gets at least 30 days if you have a correction that needs to be made, and call that phone number if you're unsure about what they're asking you to do. And I would say do that as early as possible. When you get the inspection report, you look at it, you say, okay, I understand, I'm good, and you can just go ahead and do that work. Or you look at it and you say, I'm not quite sure what this means, and call the fire station and get clarity right away so you have the maximum amount of time for that 30 days. And with that, I will take any questions that you have.
I have the mic, so I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Who's going to be assessed the $500 administration fee, the $908 enforcement fee, and then whatever cost that the ag department comes out and assesses on your home?
Okay, great question. So nobody gets the 500 admin fine or the abatement enforcement fee unless they've had 2 inspections that were non-compliant and they send it to the brush clearance office for enforcement. Right? So nobody gets that unless they're non-compliant on the second inspection. And then if we have to clear the property, then LA County Agriculture, as our vendor, they will charge whatever their cost is to do whatever that scope of work was. So
I have 2 quick questions. Your slide shows 3 inches on grass for brush clearance. This has been a very rainy year, and the grass is going to be pretty tall this year. Let's say you do brush clearance in April, next month, and the grass grows back up over 3 inches down the road. Do you have to clear twice a year?
right.
That's one question.
Okay, so to answer that one, brush clearance is a year-round responsibility.
Okay.
So even though we may only inspect once, we're looking for the compliance for that inspection, but it's really incumbent upon you as the owner to maintain your property to keep that 3 inches year-round.
Second question is a zero zone. We live in a community with a lot of palm trees. You talked about the 5-foot clearance between a building and vegetation. What if there's a palm tree within the 5-foot zone, but it's above the roof?
Great question. We believe that will be an exemption that actually fits in. It's more of a large diameter, we call them like 100-hour or larger fuels, large diameter fuel, heavy timber, you could say, where that's not really an issue related to fire. And as long as it's up over 10 feet above the roof, that would be compliant. That's what we expect when they're done.
Canopy 10 feet above.
Correct.
Is it on? I guess you probably answered the questions because there are going to be inspections, because if we are in compliance, we're hoping that our neighbors are going to do the same thing, because we've already started long before we got this notice. So I'm hoping that when the inspectors come out on both of our neighbors, that they will comply, because the worst thing I can imagine, we do this great job around our house, but our neighbors are saying, so I'm just hoping that what you're saying is that everybody has to be in compliance.
Correct. That's exactly what we're looking for. We recognize that it's a community effort as well. It's not just an individual taking care of the home, because your home impacts your neighbors and your neighbors impacts you, right? And so our inspectors are supposed to be consistent across all of their inspections and looking for the same things and requiring the same things.
How many inspectors does the county have to be able to do all these inspections, and what sort of training do the inspectors have? And are these inspectors that traditionally have done brush clearance in the past, will they be also doing the 0 to 5 zone next year and the following years?
That's a combination of operations and forestry. So the training, we're doing that right now. We do it every single year. This year we're training the entire department. So in the past, we've just done the stations that had brush inspections. And so some of our inner cities that didn't have any brush at all, we didn't train them, but we're training everybody now. So all of our inspectors, department-wide, that's about 3,000 or so inspectors total. And then the second part of your question?
How many inspectors?
What kind of training?
Trained, and then who's going to be doing the 0 to 5? Those same inspectors.
Correct. Yeah, it'll be the same inspectors. They're going to get the same training, and in fact, you've almost got the training that we give them.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you. So I've got Virginia creeper on the whole side of my house, and I'm sure they will give me a notice to remove this. So what if it takes longer? That's going to take longer than 30 days to get someone to try to remove that and paint it and so forth. Is there a way to get some kind of extension?
So here's your advantage. It's a great question. Here's your advantage. It's 2 years out, we believe, for existing construction. So you have time now to start working on it. You could wait. Really, you could wait until the Board of Forestry gets their guidelines and rules finalized, and then we will, as soon as we know they're finalized, we're going to continue to push that message out that it's done and everybody should be aware and this is what the requirements are. And so you'll have that time, because like I said earlier, new construction starts immediately. Existing construction, right, like you now, you have a full year to come into compliance. So you have plenty of time to sort that out.
Thank you.
Great presentation, Chief. Thank you very, very much. Very informative. I'm glad I came tonight because I got to believe it's going to happen. I wouldn't have known. So a couple questions. What would be the website for the high and very high severity zones so we could determine where we are? I've got friends and family throughout the state, so I'd like to inform them as well.
Right. So if you want to look at the fire hazard severity zones right now, you would go to CAL FIRE's website, and you could just type in CAL FIRE Fire Hazard Severity Zone Viewer, and from that link, once you get there, you can drill down right to your parcel.
Great.
You can zoom right in and find out where you are, and it has all of the zones.
Okay, I sit on the city council, so I have to answer some questions
Yes,
for
sir.
people. And one of them would certainly be, is there a subsidy for low income or families that would qualify to have some of the work done around their property?
Yeah, currently we do not. The county doesn't have that available. And in fact, I don't think anywhere in the state they have that available. Can you do something different though? I talked earlier about fire safe councils. So if you have a fire safe council and you can write a grant related to your fire safe council, right? So you're a nonprofit and you can do a community-wide program, you can get funding for some of that work.
Okay, two more questions. This is a personal one. We have a wooden deck attached to our house. We did it a number of years ago to some considerable expense. It's wooden. It's in code. I'm sure many, many other people have the same.
Mm-hmm.
What's the issue with that?
So wood decks
A
in
wood deck.
wood deck for AB 3074, the 5-foot M-resistant zone. Wood decks are considered part of the structure, and so they're outside their purview. So it's really it's a building component, and as long as you complied with the permit to put it in the first place, you're good to go.
Okay, great. And last one, in terms of commercial property that have the same issues, probably even more so, where trees and shrubbery are around, are they going to be affected by this as well?
So the primary focus of our inspection program, and it's what's written into the codes, is residential. It's residential structures, right? Habitable structures. Can we look at commercial structures? And the stations have that purview. They can do that if they find something that causes them problems related to defensible space and structure loss. We can absolutely address those.
And this is the last question, just a general one. Most of these big forest fires, or a good portion of them, were created by SCE. I know they have tried to address it, but is there some pressure on them to do due diligence and clean trees and branches around their source of power?
Yeah, that's a great question. Every year we have something called Operation Santa Ana, and we jointly inspect with Edison all the power lines to ensure that they have the appropriate distance and separation of fuels between the trees and the power lines. The minimum distance is typically 4 feet, and then depending on the voltage, it could be 6 feet or more. But typically we're looking for 4 feet, and that's supposed to be year-round. So when they do their trimming, they're going to look at the species, the tree. Say you have a sycamore, right, a fast-growing tree. It's going to need more clearance so that they can maintain in between trimmings that 4 feet, right? So it might grow 6 or 8 feet a year depending on the season. And so if we need to maintain 4 and it grows 8, they have to trim 12 from the line to make sure by the time they come back, it's still compliant.
Okay, very interesting. So there is a precinct in our community in Calabasas that off of Las Virgenes that have trees and wires that are very, very close to each other. Who would they contact to have that removed? Southern Cal Edison comes periodically, but not enough, and they're in danger. And there's many, many homes where this power line runs down. Is there a number or someone we could contact?
Yeah, call the brush clearance number, right? The 626-969-2375. It's in the handout, but I'll say it again, 626-969-2375. Because we work directly with Edison on these inspections, and if it's something that it's been missed, we can certainly address it with them.
It's extreme how many homes have that. How many wires to homes have the trees going?
Right. So we're not talking about the service line that goes from the pole to the house. That's
No.
different. We're talking about the
Straight
transmission line.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I just wanted to make sure also the wooden, canopies or whatever that are attached to houses, is that the same as the wooden decks, that they are going to be allowed?
So, great question. I think we're going to have to wait for the guidelines to come out because that hasn't really been addressed. If it was built with a permit, then it would probably be okay. If it was not built with a permit, like after the fact, you built a shed up next to your house and you add some lattice and that kind of stuff, my guess is that's going to be non-compliant. How that gets enforced, I don't believe it's going to be us. That would probably be a code enforcement, probably through the city. I don't know yet. We don't know how that's going to be enforced.
And my neighbor has a whole row of cypress trees, very, very tall cypress trees. If you go out in April and it's not finalized yet, will they still be mentioned in the report?
Right now,
Yeah.
no. Not until it could be as an educational piece, right? And I think we should be doing that as an educational piece for our homeowners. But would it be enforced where it gets sent sent to the brush clearance office and we have to remove it? No, I don't think so. Not at this point.
We have, if I pronounce it correctly, podocarpus.
Podocarpus.
Okay, we have, it's 8 feet away from our chimney. And it's our chimney, or I say our fireplace, is not a wood-burning fireplace. And we do have it trimmed up at least 3 feet. Is that in compliance with the zone 0, or the 5 feet?
Yeah. Outside of 5 feet from the structure, so you said 8 feet. So
Yeah.
yes.
We're okay.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, it's a whole...
Yeah. What we would probably look at is lifting up the bottom section of it, right? That separation of fuels that I talked about earlier. And to look at any sort of dead component, because podocarpus tends to have a lot of dead, all the leaves drop onto the inside.
Correct.
We'd be looking at that. So as long as you lift it up and it's outside the 5 feet and the dead's taken out, I think you're good.
I have a lot of roses and certain small citrus and so forth next to the house. Can I put them in pots? Because I was allowed to do that when I built an ADU. Can I put them in pots next to the house?
That is a fantastic question. When Zone 0 comes into effect, larger than 18 inches inside pots would be non-compliant. That's the draft that I've seen so far.
So the plant itself, 18 inches or less.
Correct.
And the pot doesn't matter how big it is.
Pot doesn't matter, but it has to be non-combustible.
Which means what? Clay or?
Yes.
But not plastic.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Is a metal carport considered structure, or is it 5 feet from the structure of the home?
Carport. I think we'd have to evaluate it, but typically we're going to go from the wall of the structure.
That's what I mean. So you mean the house itself?
Correct.
And
yeah.
then 5
from the
feet-
wall, not the covering.
That's what I mean. So, but then like you're here, the carport comes over 5 feet from here.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Keep all your pine needles off the carport, you're good.
That I understand. Thank you.
Is there anybody that would like an individual one-on-one with some of our folks? Yeah, we'll continue answering questions, but if you want that one-on-one, you can speak with, we have Chief Romo in the back and Kathleen as well in the back. Well, go ahead. We'll take more questions.
Who had a question?
Because in our backyard, we have the Lupin Elementary School, and sometimes they've had problems, whoever the contractors are that does the weed abatement. So our question is, if they're not doing a good job, and they think they've done it because they say, well, we paid X amount of thousands of dollars, and this is what we get, what does the fire department, or do you guys inspect the Lupin Elementary School property that it is done properly?
So, great question. So I have the answer right here, and that answer is a yes. We do inspect as well. Even though they're not on our declaration list, our inspection list, we still have a number of other things that we do. And some of it, like for our cities, if we see something, they're not on the list, but if we see something that we recognize, there's a hazard, we'll go speak to the appropriate people in our cities as well.
In our community, we have 84 homes, and as I said, there are 0 lot lines, so we have the wooden fences in between touching all structures. Is there anything that might be a lesser, would cost less to do rather than replace them with block or whatever? Something that can be sprayed on them, or that would be non-combustible? Anything that is out there that we might not know about?
I think the right answer right now is to wait and see what the guidelines actually say. And once we have those specific rules, then we can make those determinations on what qualifies and what doesn't. Yes, sir.
If embers can go 5 miles and ignite a home, how far into the valley then do you expect to do your inspections?
Right. Thank you for that question. Yeah. Right. So how far do we go? Where do we determine what the edge is? And we use the criteria. right? It's mapped by CAL FIRE. We use those maps. Right now, we're on the 2007 version, right? And when they update, we'll move to the new version, right? So we use those maps for criteria. And as long as it's in the zone and single-family residential, those are the inspections.
Yes, but those are the edges. And 5 miles from that edge, you need to inspect theoretically, because there could be a fire on the very outer edge of a high fire or very high fire risk. And
Right.
those people are probably no fire risk.
Yeah, so again, we use the mapping, and the
You go
mapping
5 miles past the edges?
we use the mapping that CAL FIRE gives us, that provides to us, because they've done the analysis on how far they think Embercast will go. That's part of their analysis, and
Okay.
that's why it pushes into cities and developments for that Embercast, and that's where the zones are drawn based on that Embercast.
So there's been 2 separate APNs for everybody's property. A first set that was sent out and a second set that are not the same.
Do you have an example? Did you bring that with you?
Well, I didn't
'Cause-
make a copy of the first set, but I've got the second set.
Because we only use one APN per parcel. There is only one assessor's parcel number per
Right.
parcel.
I know, but the first notice that was sent out was based on the very high severity something or other map that included all of Malibu. The second notice that was a corrected notice that was sent out was based on the the VHSV, Z, whatever, that one, the second one. And it's totally different. So I'm confused about, I mean, that's a lot of $100 per property. That's a gazillion dollars you guys are going to collect. If everybody got an assessment fee of $100 or an inspection fee of $100, what's the accountability? Where are you going to spend that money? It can't be all spent on enforcement. I mean, that's a ton of money. So I don't understand. I mean, there was 2 different APNs that were sent out. The first batch got wiped out. The second one that is now just based on the VHSV map, that looks legitimate to me.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't make a copy of the first one. I made a copy of the second one. I only made a copy of the first one that has my property on it. But what I'm trying to say is, a lot of the properties in Santa Monica Mountains are nonprofits. Mountain Restoration Trust, Nature Conservancy and stuff, they're not on the list. They're not being assessed. It's just like homeowners are being assessed.
Right. So it's the same fire hazard severity zone map. That hasn't changed. Right? Hasn't changed. Since 2007, those are the fire hazard severity zones. Okay? Just related to state parks, the county doesn't have any jurisdiction on state agencies. Right? So state park, MRCA, MRT, any of those state agencies, even the federal, right? The national parks, NPS, we don't have any jurisdiction on them. We will advise, but we can't force compliance with the state agencies. Correct.
So like Paramount Ranch, you guys have no jurisdiction over?
Yeah, if it's a state agency, Paramount Ranch is a...
We do. It's
That-
federal government.
That's what I mean, so they don't
Yeah.
clear it, they don't, okay, I was always curious about that, thank you.
I can talk that. I'll talk that. Okay, so I'll talk to the cooperators that we have, which would be MRCA, National Park Services, State Parks. Just because they're there doesn't mean they don't do it. They do their brush clearance on them. They're part of the county, but they are not going to get a notice, but they do it every year. So if you go down, if you're at Cornell, if you go down Malibu Canyon, you can probably see that they do, and a lot of the commercial occupancies do, their brush clearance. And you can see that over the years. So they will not physically give a notice from us, but some of the residences that are on their property do. So they have some of the housing that's there that are dwellings, but their offices and stuff, they do a very good job for their brush clearance. So they're not exempt, let's just say that. They do a great job with their compliancy on their brush clearance.
Were these types of inspections done in Paradise?
Yeah. So we can't talk to what the compliance or non-compliance was. And the question was talking to the Paradise fire. But what I can tell you, the fire dynamics that happened in Paradise are different than those fire dynamics that are here based upon fuel type. And plus they had different structures, different separations. So it's hard to, a wind-driven fire or a devastating fire that sends out that much heat energy will have catastrophic effects regardless of what's in its way. So it's hard to compare, but knowing for our area, and I can give you that the 100 years worth of fire history, we've had a significant housing loss or commercial structure loss from the 118 freeway to the Pacific Ocean. So fire history has repeated itself. And I know that this is monumental for the aesthetics. And what's kind of a shame is like I come into 20 to 30 days a year is when it really matters. And that's when we get from October to December on those high risk days. As we all know that we live here, 330 of those days it's pleasant. But it comes to those high risk days. The routine day fires don't have the same fire effects as they do when we have the Santa Ana winds blowing in. So a lot of this in our area with a very high fire severity zones, they're mapped, look at them, but they serve a role. And I know that that within the Santa Monica Mountains, there's a lot of maintenance needs to be done. But if you go to fire history, this isn't new to us. And so the proactive approach, and this is what I would say is a soft rollout we did last year. Because and I have some of my friends in the room that are not firefighters, know about the education component on the soft rollout that it's coming down the pipe, that when we go and talk to our residents that are used to doing brush clearance, that they've got them for 30 to 40 years, they understand. And so the maintenance portion is relatively easy for them. It's going to be the new folks that either moved to the area or have been in the area for quite some time and this is new to them. You're going to look at, hey, where do I start? And we're here to help you with that. And I'll go back to your question on the back. Oh, what if you don't have 30 days? Because if we go and we look at your parcel and say, hey, you need to do X, Y, and Z, and then we go back in 30 days and we know that you've done X and Y, we're going to talk to you. We're going to say, hey, you're doing a great job. Keep doing what you're doing. What do you think about another 7, 8 days? You think, oh, I have my landscapers coming next Wednesday. They had whatever it is. We do that routinely on interacting with the community to make sure that it's that we can meet your need. We do, but we don't want to get taken advantage of either. And that does happen. So with that, please, if you have a mapping question, you have any of the stuff that the information here, and if you look at it, has where you can reach the maps of reference. It has the phone numbers of different areas that you may need to call within LA County or outside of LA County. So please grab the reference material. And with that, we're going to stick around if you want to have one-on-one conversation. Thank you for being here, and please reach out. So thank you very much.